the long and short of it was an administrator had done something that really screwed up a rehearsal that I felt was very important, as they all are, and I was really upset. And I had 104 students in this room, and we couldn't rehearse, and it was really a problem. And I asked a colleague, "Where is the boss?" And I went and found him, and I told him what was on my mind. And he very calmly said, "Turn around, walk away, do not say another word, and come find me in my office tomorrow morning." And I said, "But," he said, "I gave you your instructions." And so I left. At that point, I realized, oh dear, I might be getting fired tomorrow morning.
Welcome to the Directors Podium. I'm your host, Adam Christie. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have a doozy for you today. Our guest is called one of the most exciting and exhilarating voices in music education today. Our guest has been invited to speak and conduct in every state in the nation and around the world. He was honored by the National Association for Music Education and Music for All as the first recipient for the George M. Parks Award for Leadership in Music Education. He is the Director of Education for Jupiter Band Instruments, and his weekly Boonshaft's blog for music educators continues to inspire educators and teachers everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a professor at Hofstra University. He is literally one of the greatest conductors in the world, definitely America. But I have never seen better than this man right here. Please join me in welcoming Peter Loel Boonshaft. Peter, thanks so much for joining us today.
Adam, thank you so much for having me. I can't thank you enough for your kind words. I am humbled by them, and I'm so appreciative that you would allow me this opportunity.
So, Peter, would you tell us what made you want to be a teacher in the first place?
What got me started, what made me want to be a teacher? Well, I fell in love with music very early. I was probably in seventh or the beginning of eighth grade when I just was taken with it, and had the opportunity of being in an elementary school band a year before I should have, which exposed me to this amazing thing that we call concert band. And it just lit a fire in me. And I always knew that I wanted to be a music teacher and a band director from then on. I have an older sister who I adore. And at one point in my life, we were driving somewhere and she said, "So what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be a band director." And she said, "Okay, what if you don't be a band director? Then what?" And I said, No, I'm going to be a band director. And she got a little frustrated with me and she said, "Okay, but what if not? People change their mind 1,000 times. You're 8 years old. What other things?" I said, "No, Ann, I'm going to be a band director. There is nothing else." And she said, "Okay, you're going to go to college. You'll change your mind 10 times. And I said, "No, I won't." And she was so frazzled at that point. She said, she was driving. She said, "Reach into my purse and grab a slip of paper." So there was an old envelope. And she said, "Write on that envelope, 'I will be a band director,' and sign it and date it. So when you change your mind in 15 years, I can wave it in front of you and tell you how obnoxious you were when you were little." Well, sure enough, when I graduated as a band director, she gave that to me in a frame which sits in my office. So it was never a question to me. I always wanted to be a band director, and I think it was just because I was so taken with the sounds, the sights, the person in front of the podium guiding all of us, and that never changed.
Wow, that's incredible. Just fantastic. What do you think makes a great teacher, Peter?
Well, I'll tell you, Adam, we could go on with that question for probably 3 or 4 days nonstop and just touch the surface. It's a myriad of things, as I think we could all agree. I think, number one, that one has to be, and this is in no specific order, one has to be a great student. By that, I mean someone who is always curious, always wanting to learn more, always wanting to find out what's on the next hill. And I think that curiosity is something that becomes infectious to our students. I think someone who's a great listener, someone who cares and is always with a goal in mind of where the students should be, but more importantly, caring for those students' well-being. and making certain that they are nourished, if you will, in a way that makes them happy and feeling good about what they've done and their progress and the like. I think it's someone who is willing to be part of a team. I think great teachers are always looking for people to be in a team with, whether that be within our discipline or in different disciplines, where we can join with others and say, what can we do to help this community, whether that be a school or whether that be a grade level or whether that could be an ensemble or whatever it happens to be. I think it's someone who is a great leader and is always willing to lead by motivating and by showing students what the goals can provide, but what that has at the end for them. I think they're just a few of the things that come to mind immediately to me.
What would you say, out of all of the things that you've accomplished through your life and you've done, what are you most proud of?
Wow, these are wonderfully thoughtful questions, Adam. I think first and foremost would be my students, all of them. I'm always humbled to have the opportunity to teach, and that a group of people would sit in front of me, whether that be in an ensemble or a class, and allow me to help. That to me is a daunting task. It's an enormous responsibility. It's a humbling moment, as I said, but it's an honor. It truly is an honor. So I would say I'm most proud when especially as I get into my older years, to look at students and what they've accomplished, and then binarily what they've accomplished for their students. And I look and think to myself that I've helped in ways by helping others. I remember going to a festival that I was conducting, an honors band in a state. And one of my former students from quite a long time ago, back in the early 80s, said, I want to take you to lunch. So after a rehearsal, we walked over to a restaurant for lunch. And it was a round table with, probably about 7 or 8 people. And I didn't know any of the others. And he quick introduced them all to me. And as the meal went on, conversation, just chatting, and one of the young people there said to one of the others, well, I remember when you told me this, and it really impacted my teaching greatly. And it was a little story with a kind of a motive to a little slogan at the end of it. And I kind of smiled, and the gentleman who brought me smiled, and he looked at me and he winked, and I thought, And I listened a little bit more, and I came to find out that there were a couple of stories that were like this. And finally I said, that's really interesting, to the person who brought me. And he said, oh, did I forget to tell you? Well, he was my student teacher, and that was his student teacher. And by the way, all those stories you just told about me, they were really about him. And he pointed to me. And it was basically that I was like the great grandfather in that setting, that this was now a couple of generations removed, and these were young teachers. And I felt really good. I felt that this was an important part of my life, that I could in some way inspire these teachers to go and be wonderful teachers, and that they had this ability to then spark that in generations of students that I'll never meet. And that to me is probably the greatest thing in the career, I think.
Does it ever still happen, or has it ever happened to you? Sometimes when you're at such a high skill level and you deal with, say, college students, and you deal with honor groups all the time, I'm wondering, does it ever happen where you get in front of a group and they are just not responding to you the way that you thought they would?
Well, I don't know if the word would be thought I would. It's more, I think, hoped they would. Yeah, on occasion, one has to, I think, whether it's a classroom in anywhere, in a school or in an honors ensemble or at a university, there are always times, I think, that we have to take stock of what's going on and say, this is not going the way I had planned. I think I need to take a detour. I learned very early in my career, when I tried to steamroll ahead and say, well, this was the lesson plan, darn it, this is what we're doing. And I just kept driving. And I learned very quickly that that was a real good recipe for failure. And when I finally gave myself license to say, okay, that's not going to work, let's go this way. and ended up having these wonderful days and wonderful lessons and wonderful rehearsals that I thought, wow, that's a valuable lesson. I'm glad I learned it early. I wish I had learned it earlier, but so yeah, I think there's always that occasion, and there are times when I think to myself, well, okay, this is the level this ensemble will play when I go, especially to a different place for an honors group, and I'm met with different things. It might be different strengths and weaknesses. It might be different way of reacting to me, and I think that's always for us as teachers to be the one to change and to say, okay, I need to temper this. I need to go this way. I need to drive the car in a way that's going to be more palatable for everyone. And I think we get very good as teachers at doing that very quickly and moving forward.
The question I have for you, I don't know if the people outside of this would ask, but I have for you because I've looked up a lot of what you've done. I've watched how you direct a lot. And one of the songs that you like to do, apparently, at festivals or honor groups is the song Rest by Frank Ticheli. What is it about that piece that draws you back to it?
I first heard Frank do that with an ensemble many years ago, and sat in the audience. It was a concert that Frank and I were both conducting on, and I sat in the audience waiting for my pieces and watched Frank do this, and my jaw went to the floor and pretty much has stayed there ever since. I feel that piece is almost a direct connection when played well and sensitively and emotionally, which I'm not sure if one could help but do that. It's such a powerful piece. But I believe it's a direct connection to those who play it and those who hear it. It's almost as if everyone's arm in arm, locked together. It is one of the most powerful pieces that I know. It is one of the most sensitive pieces. I think one aspect I love of it is the enormity of certain moments within the piece, and then where it comes down to moments which are almost chamber-esque in how small and dainty and delicate they are. And it's that raw power in some places and that incredible elegance in others. But I think it's the poem that it is based upon, and how Frank was able to paint it so magnificently. That is that way of making everyone feel it. It's not a piece that one has to sell. It's not one we have to coax students into saying, come on, give it a try. You're going to love this eventually, which we've all been in. We've all had that situation, trying to get kids to play a piece or to buy into it. It's not one. This is a piece that once it starts to come together and students get a sense of what it is, they want to play it as much as we would. And I think it's the incredible intensity of the emotional portrayal of this piece, especially bound to that text.
I don't think it's not fair to say this, but I don't think that all pieces that are, because it was originally a choral piece that he wrote, and then he transcribed it for band. It doesn't always work well when that happens, but that piece, for some reason, and he changed it a little bit, but it really translated well into the band world per se. But as I've seen you do that piece, your interpretation seems to not always be the same every time that you've done it with a group. Sometimes it seems that you're changing some things that you did in one group but don't do in another. How do you do that? Do you feel like your interpretation changes?
I would hope it would change somewhat, still obviously honoring, hopefully, the intentions of the composer. I think it does, depending on the group that one's conducting, depending on the size of the ensemble, the strength of the ensemble, the place we're performing in. I think all of those variables do allow for some change to some small degree. But I remember once sharing a conference with Frank, and we were walking to lunch. And I vividly remember where we were. And we were going up the steps, and Frank had just done a piece, I forget which piece it was of his, it wasn't Rest, it was another one, that I had conducted several times. And as we're walking up the steps, I said, Frank, I owe you a giant apology. And he looked shocked at me, and I said, yeah, He said, what for? And I said, I have been doing that piece all wrong. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, and I mentioned 3 places in the piece that he did radically different than I had thought to do. And he said, oh, do you mean here? And he said which it was. And then he said, and then there? And I said, yep. And he said, and then there? I said, yes. And he said, oh, yeah, no, you're doing it the way I wrote it. I just do it differently. And I said, which is right? And he said, exactly. And I thought, okay. He said, you do what you think. And I said, okay. So that has always allowed me to think to myself, I hear his words in the back of my head, as long as I think I'm bringing honor to the piece and respecting his wishes. But sometimes it is the subtleties of what's going on in front of me.
I read your books through high school and throughout college, and they were such fire starters for me. Like, they are so inspiring. And the stories that you talked about earlier, that you said that that gentleman had pointed to an anecdote that you had told him. Do you remember which of those books you have that in, or is it in a future book coming?
That actually isn't in one of the books, and I never thought to put it in one. I'm not sure. It's one of those things that's more meaningful to me than it probably would be to anybody else, just because I get to look at the legacy of the lineage of how this goes with that lineage of other students as it moves forward. But no, that anecdote isn't actually in one of the 3.
Yeah, well, I hope you put it in eventually, because
oh, you're very kind.
There are hardly any stories that you have that I think are just meant for the world, because so much of what you've gone through, you have a beautiful way of teaching that moment to everybody else and making them feel like they experienced that moment too. So thank you so much.
That's very kind of you. That's, I never intended to write any books. That was not in my mindset. It was not a goal. Matter of fact, it never even occurred to me. And I was doing a conference, and a gentleman in the publishing world happened to come in the last few minutes of me doing a workshop, a session. And he said, so when's the book? And I said, what book? And he said, the book with these sessions in them. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about, nor do I have any interest, and I'm not a writer. And he said, you're obviously you're writing a book. And I said, no, I'm not writing a book. I honestly am not. And it got me thinking. And he would stop me every couple of months as I saw him on the road and say, you really should do this. And that's what really sparked the idea, well, maybe I should. And I started talking to people who said, yeah, you really should. And so that's what got me started. And it's been a wonderful journey to do them and an honor to do them. So I appreciate the kind words. It means the world.
Was it Tim Lautzenheiser that said that?
No, Tim did write the foreword to the first book, and he was very instrumental in coercing me. It was actually Bruce Bush who did that, who I had known for decades at that point. And he was the one who said, you really should do this. And then I decided, I would look into this, and I talked to several different publishers, and all were very encouraging. And I made the decision to go with one. And it's been really a great time, honestly.
Tim Lautzenheiser, who we have interviewed before, he, I don't know why God put so much encouragement in one man, but I'm so glad he did.
You and me both. Yeah. He has been an inspiration my whole career. He has prodded me to do certain things, including the books. He has been an incredible source of wisdom, a source of inspiration, a source of encouragement. He is truly one of a kind.
Let's take a little bit of a dip into the leadership world. Okay, you get in front of a group, you are the leader at that point. In your toughest teaching situations or leading situations, that is often when you find out what is your best. Like, when you were at your best is often when it was the toughest. What do you think has been your finest moment as a leader?
I don't know about a finest moment as much as when I think that I served my students well in that moment. And it's usually when I've been able to break a cycle, when I've been in front of a class or a group that I think is not convinced that they can succeed, or maybe is not convinced that they want to do the work necessary to do this task, or feel that they are not really worthy of what they can be. And it's convincing them that they can. And I think that's the challenge for every teacher. I think all of us, no matter what the ensemble, no matter what the age level is, no matter where we teach, that's always a challenge, is to get students to believe in themselves. And I think that's the challenge of leadership. We can know all the theory in the world. We can have a handle on repertoire. We can have the best hands a conductor could have. We could have any of those things. We could have the best sense of music history. Whatever it is, we could all have those things. And if we don't have that leadership skill, it's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it. Does it make a sound? I think it's our ability to harness a group through our leadership skills and to get them to want to do it, to know how to do it, and to perceive the value, if you will, of what's at the end of that path. And I think it's those times in my life when I have been able to stop what I see as a negative kind of waning of those things, and instead turn it around and get them to be jazzed about what's going on. I remember once doing an ensemble that it was it was an ensemble that did not have a good feeling about themselves. It was a place where they auditioned many groups, and this was the lowest of the tier of them. And they went in with this attitude of, well, obviously everyone's told us we're the worst because we're the fifth ensemble or sixth ensemble. I forget what it was. And I remember thinking, why did they think this? And it was a tough go for the first, 45 minutes. And attitudinally, they played very well, but they just didn't think they were worthwhile because they felt that they had been branded, if you will, the worst group by being the fifth or sixth or whatever it was. And I remember going to my hotel room that night and restlessly laying there in bed thinking, what do I do? And the next morning we had a long talk. And the talk was basically, I believe in them. They should be honored because they get to sit in a room full of wonderful people making music, which not everyone in this world gets to do, and have glorious repertoire to play, et cetera, et cetera. And I started doing this. And I'll tell you what has, at every juncture, served me to help students get past this. And it's always been to help them experience a moment of beauty. It's what I've always referred to as a pearl, and I've written about it in the books a couple of times. It's one little thing. I think, if we wait for a piece to be wonderful, well, we all know that could take a while. If we wait for perfect, we all know that's never going to happen. And one of the things that I've always tried to instill in teachers is that we make a pearl. One little pearl hanging on a necklace is a beautiful thing, a beautiful beginning, beautiful middle, beautiful end. It's just gorgeous. True, 20 of them strung on a necklace is even nicer, but one pearl is perfect. And what I've always thought is every rehearsal, we need to make a pearl. We need to make one thing, whether it's just one beautiful triad, one little phrase, one cadence, that we can start the ball rolling by saying, did you hear it? Did you hear how beautiful that was? That was gorgeous, and you did that. And to let them feel the power of what they did, what they created, what they were able to harness. And then that sets the expectation of, wow, everything needs to be that good. But more importantly, how great did that feel? It's worth the work to make it feel that way. And whenever I've tried to motivate a group to get past themselves, if you will, that's how I've thought to go first. And it's usually served me well. And that ensemble I was just referring to, I sat down, I said, we're going to do this one thing. And I did just the last couple, 3 measures of a piece. And I polished it as best as we could to make it beautiful. And I knew it would be a tearjerker if we could do it. And at the end of it, the students were sitting up taller, holding their instruments just a little better, breathing a little deeper, watching a little better, but more importantly, they were feeling more. And by the end of this, I put my hands down and I said, did you hear that? That was beautiful. The tingle, the feeling of the skin, the goosebumps, that was just beautiful. And they looked at each other. I could see them looking around the room to make sure that they weren't the only one feeling that. And it turned the corner like a switch. And from then on, they wanted it as much as I did, probably more. And that to me is really the leadership skill that I think we as ensemble directors, but more importantly, in anything we do, that leadership role is to me the most powerful, because it's not me saying, okay, you should do this for this reason. that only goes so far. And if they trust me and they like me to some degree, okay, it'll have a little impact, but it's nothing compared to what the power of music can do because of that straight line connection between what we hear and what we feel. And that to me has always been better than any words. It's been better than any gimmick, so to speak.
Your stories are so great. Have you ever had, as a leader, any leadership decisions that you wish you could redo? And could you share a little bit about that?
Oh boy, from my early teaching, oh yeah. Oh, well, first 5 years certainly of my teaching, I wish I could get back, apologize to every student, and get a redo. Unfortunately, life doesn't provide that, but at least we learn from those mistakes. Yeah, I think very early on in my career, I can remember vividly a moment where the long and short of it was an administrator had done something that really screwed up a rehearsal that I felt was very important, as they all are, and I was really upset. And I had 104 students in this room, and we couldn't rehearse, and it was really a problem. And I asked a colleague, "Where is the boss?" And I went and found him, and I told him what was on my mind. And he very calmly said, "Turn around, walk away, do not say another word, and come find me in my office tomorrow morning." And I said, "But," he said, "I gave you your instructions." And so I left. At that point, I realized, oh dear, I might be getting fired tomorrow morning. And I went into his office and he closed the door and he said, "What you felt was 100% correct. What I did wrong, you had every right to be upset about. But the way you handled it was totally inappropriate." And he said, "If you don't learn that, you're not going to get very far as a teacher." And I was very, very new as a teacher. And he said, "It has nothing to do with the problem. It has to do with how you handled the problem." And I remember many years later hearing the expression, tact is the ability of making a point without making an enemy. Well, that was the day that I learned the essence of that quote. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you understand how you should have handled it?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." And he said, "Do you give me your word you will never handle something like that again that way?" And I said, "I absolutely do." And he said, "Great, let me go buy you lunch." And we were fast friends for years and years to come. And he taught me a valuable lesson in leadership, in just dealing with human beings, that there's always a path that will keep people civil, will keep people happy, will keep people communicating, will keep people believing in the power of a group doing things, whether that be several teachers or administrator, whatever it is, but never make enemies, never put anyone on the spot. And I think for us as teachers, as administrators, as leaders, it's keenly important that we always can make our points without disenfranchising anyone, without making anybody feel less, without having to be domineering, but instead get to the root of what's going on and help the situation. And I think that was probably, and it was, as I said, very early in my career. And I'm kind of glad it happened, as much as those 24 hours till we saw each other again were very sleepless. I'm glad it happened because if it had happened later in my career, who knows? I might not have had a teaching career. Who knows? But
have you written that story down?
no, I haven't. It's one that I worry about. Yeah, maybe I should someday. Wonderful gentleman, though.
That's fantastic. And you just listen to that, and you may not have known it at the time because he just made that huge, he did make a mistake and he acknowledged that. But you can look back at that and be like, "Oh, that was a hell of a leader." Like, it was great.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And he was quiet. He was kind at every juncture. Never heard him raise his voice, never heard him lose his temper. And he was just the kind of person that you wanted to do your best for, which isn't that something we could all say we want to be as teachers, as leaders, that we always want to do that. And I think that's a very important thing. But, one of the things you just said sparks another thought. One of the other really let's just say, not good moments in my teaching career was a time in a rehearsal, and very early on, as probably my second or third year of teaching. And I was very hard on a section. and got frustrated. And I was finished rehearsal and sitting in my office, and there was a knock at the door, and I opened it, and it was a trumpet player, a wonderful young man, and he said, "May I speak to you for a moment?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "You owe us an apology." And he was very calm, very even keeled. He said, "You owe us an apology." And I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "You were really rough on us in rehearsal today." He said, "We were trying our best. We didn't do very well. I'll admit that, but that doesn't mean you had to be that hard on us." And I remember standing there thinking, I have a choice. I can defend what I did, or I can honor his feelings. And I realized at that moment that that was always the better choice, the second. And I said to him, "You're absolutely right. And not only am I going to tell you that now, I'm going to tell the entire ensemble tomorrow morning." And at the next rehearsal, I started by saying, "I owe all of you, especially the trumpets, an apology. You should never see me like that, and I should never have gotten that upset. Was I happy with how rehearsal was going? No. But I had no right to take it out on you that way." And that really was an epiphany for me. And, the generation that I grew up watching was still of that ilk where it was okay to get angry. And fortunately, those days are long behind us. And I'm not saying we can't push groups a little harder, and I'm not saying that we have to say it's great when it isn't, because I don't believe in that at all. But I realized then by apologizing to them, that made our relationship so much more solid. And I think every teacher who learns the ability to say, "I'm sorry," or "I was wrong," that's probably the moment that teacher starts to become a really wonderful teacher. And I hope that I'll always remember that. We're always going to make mistakes. It's just, we're human. And it's a question of owning up to the mistakes, especially for those that we care for so much.